Brad, alcoholic.
Brad.
Thanks, Clark. Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm an alcoholic. I'll go ahead and get a few disclaimers out of the way. My sobriety date is January 15th, 2019. I got a sponsor. My sponsor's got a sponsor. And what we do in our line of sponsorship is very simple. We work the steps with our sponsor, and then we take other men through the steps. And so as a result of that, I've sponsored a lot of guys in AA, and I still sponsor a lot of guys in AA. That's just what I believe in. I believe in the 12 steps, and I believe in taking other men through the steps and passing on what was given to me. Drugs are a part of my story, but I'm going to try to keep that to a minimum out of respect for Alcoholics Anonymous and out of respect for this group. Currently, I do not have a home group, and I'll say this, I feel like this is very important. When I first got sober and I stayed in a recovery home down there in Aberdeen, the Keeping It Sober group, this group was my home group for a little bit over 2 years. And I believe that if anyone in here does not have a home group and you're looking to join a home group, I believe that this is the best group in Moore County. COVID happened. Here's the truth. I could make all these excuses as to why I stepped away from the group. I was sponsoring 6, 7 guys at a time, all this. All that is just a bunch of bullshit, to be honest. The truth is this. I just became unwilling to continue to be an active member of this home group. I had a lot of commitments outside of this group, and I just chose to step away from it. It was a personal decision, and I just feel like it's always important for me to say that when I'm asked to speak here. I believe that this is a really good home group. So yeah, I'll get into it just in a general way, tell you what it was like, what happened, and what my life is like now currently today. So I grew up in a town right outside of Raleigh called Garner. When I was growing up, it was a real small area. It's kind of like it is around here now. It's in Southern Pines. It's like up and booming and upcoming, a lot of growth and development and all that. I grew up in an alcoholic home. My mother is not one of us, and my father is. As a child, I remember there being a lot of chaos and yelling and just dysfunction in the home. I didn't know anything about alcoholism or untreated alcoholism at that, and I didn't know that that's what my father was suffering from, and I had no clue that that was what was causing all these things going on at the house. One of my earliest childhood memories was I had a friend that lived down the street. We lived on the top of the hill, and I was down the street playing at his house, and I went to come home later that afternoon, and I remember walking back up the hill, and there was a bunch of Garner police outside my parents' house, okay? And they had my mom and my dad separated. My dad was standing out to the side on the front porch, and he didn't have a shirt on, and he had a huge gash. His chest was cut open, and he had a gash and blood leaking down him. And my mom had my little sister in her lap, and they were over the way with the police, and my sister and my mom were sitting there crying, talking to the cops, and my dad was all just distraught, cussing, talking this and that. I had no clue what had happened. From coming up looking, it would look like they got in an altercation. That wasn't what happened. They got in an argument over my dad's alcoholism, over my dad drinking and doing what we do. And he got mad, and he stormed off, and he went into the bathroom. He shut himself in there, and he was drinking, and he had a glass beer bottle, and when he finished it, he threw it into a bathtub, a porcelain bathtub, and it ricocheted and came back up and cut him. Still not knowing anything about alcoholism, but here's what I did know. That was the last night that my parents slept under the same roof together, and I mentioned that it was important to me because what it did was, I hear a lot of alcoholics and a lot of people in here say that they felt different at a young age, and really, like, up until that point in my life, I don't ever really remember feeling different than other kids or anything like that. But when that happened and my family was like torn apart and like separated, I remember at a young age, like being in middle school, like going around asking these kids, like, are your parents still together? Because like it really affected me and impacted me deeply. Like I didn't understand, like, why does my family got to be all screwed up like this? Like, why do I got to go back and forth 1 week with my mom, 1 week with my dad? I just didn't get it. And I saw these other kids that were like my friends, and like their parents had been married for like 15, 20 years, and they were happy and they had good lives. And I just had this like preconceived notion in my head, like that's the way stuff is supposed to be. Like families are supposed to stay together. And shortly after, my mom met a man and she remarried him, and she remarried to him, and that just like disgusted me. Like my goal was like, whatever I can do to make this dude's life a living hell, like I'm gonna do it. Like I'm gonna get in trouble at school, I'm gonna act out, I'm gonna do whatever I want. Like my dad would feed into that, and so we would go 1 week with my mom, 1 week with my dad, and like I said, my dad's an alcoholic, and as we all know, and the book talks about it, like it's a progressive disease, right? So things with my dad just keep getting worse and worse and worse. He could not provide any type of stability for us. He was always getting kicked out of this place, kicked out of that place, bouncing around from one place to another. And I remember, like, my mom used to say that me and my little sister would come home from his house smelling like a strip club. And truthfully, at a young age, we saw a lot of things that kids our age should not have seen. I mean, I remember being 11 years old and seeing a group of people walk out of a back room at my dad's house with a plate with white stuff cut out on it, and everybody's drinking, and girls are walking around topless in the house. I mean, I was 11 and my sister's like 9. And, my mom eventually, she just got sick of it. Her and my stepdad, they got a lawyer involved, and they set my dad down and they gave him some options. They were like, look, you can either sign this paperwork or we're going to take your kids from you. Like, we can go before a judge and all this evidence, and the judge ain't going to side with my dad. And so he signed the paperwork, and it meant that we could only see him every other weekend, or I can't remember the exact terms of it, but at my mom's discretion, and whenever the court said we could go see him, we could see him. And that made me resent my mom and my stepdad even more. I started acting out more in school and getting in fights, getting suspended. And I don't remember the first time that I put substances or alcohol into my body, but here's what I do remember. It was one of those weekends where we were able to see my dad, and I had sat outside for like hours waiting for him to come and pick us up. My sister was like, she had just gave up on him at that point. Like, she was like, I ain't going. She ended up coming, though, and we got back to my dad's house, wherever he was staying at, and some little townhome in the hood in Raleigh. And he passed out doing what we do, on the couch, snoring, drunk. And me and my sister went upstairs and we started rummaging around through his stuff. We went in his closet. It seemed like a good idea to me. And come across a carton of Marlboro Red cigarettes. First thing we found. I said, hell yeah. Boom, grabbed the dang full pack of them cigarettes, found the lighter. We went out back by the little pool area at this place, and we started chain smoking these cigarettes back to back to back. And I remember feeling lightheaded, and then shortly after, I remember like my face. Like, I looked they had this like little mirror, like dressing little thing out, and my face was like turning like super. I thought I was gonna pass out, like red, vomiting everywhere. And, most kids, after they did something like that, they would be like my sister, who's not an alcoholic. Like, I ain't never doing no shit like that again, period. Like, that was a terrible experience. And that just wasn't the case with me. I liked it. I remember the way it made me feel. I remember it taking me outside of myself. And more importantly, it was this. I remember that we did something that was wrong. And I remember the adrenaline that it produced and the effect that was produced by it. And I liked the way that it made me feel. I knew it was wrong. I knew we did it. And we got away with it. And I made a decision at a young age, like right then and there. Every opportunity that I have to do something like this from this point forward, I'm going to do it. It made me forget about my parents being divorced and all this family trauma and all this BS that I had going on in my head. And that continued until middle school and high school. And, y'all know the deal, doing other things, smoking marijuana, just the list goes on and on and on. And this is important for me. So I got my dad over here, right, and I see all this stuff, and I'm thinking, like, this stuff that he's doing, that's what is going to make me feel this way and make me forget about all this stuff in my head. And I was attracted to that. Like, I wanted to, as ridiculous as it sounds, like, I wanted to be like that. That's what I set out and strived to be. And I got my mom and my stepdad over here trying to instill, which they did. They did the best they could with the situation that they were dealing with. Trying to instill good morals and values and principles in me and keep me involved in sports. And I did very well in sports in school. I excelled in baseball. I played tennis in high school. And eventually the substances and alcohol became paramount to all that stuff. My value system got really, really, really distorted at a young age. And eventually it was like, I ain't playing baseball no more. I ain't playing tennis no more. I'll get C's in school, and that's good enough. I won't fail. I'll be able to pass, whatever. And the alcohol and substances was just boom, 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 moving up the pole, moving up the totem pole, moving up the list until eventually it was number one. And before I knew it, by the time I was a freshman, sophomore in high school, sophomore in high school, that was the year I quit playing tennis. It controlled everything I did. The people I hung around, the places I went, who I associated, how I carried myself, how I acted, everything. And I made a decision early on, like college wasn't for me. I wasn't going to go to college. I didn't really have any aspirations to do that. I just wanted to be like my dad. And by this time, my mom and my stepfather, they couldn't really, all that court stuff was still in place, but it was like I was so out of control, they couldn't stop me from going to see my dad. Garner was a small town back then. Like, my dad lived like 2 miles up the street. I didn't have a vehicle, but I had Pat and Charlie. I could just go out my mom's front door and walk, meet. My dad would come pick me up, whatever. And eventually, me and him started using substances together. And I talk about this a lot when I speak. It was kind of like I felt like all that time that they tried to keep me from him and that he wasn't present in my life and I wasn't able to be there with him. It was like now I felt like I found this bond with my dad, like this piece that had been missing. And it was through alcohol and substance abuse, right? And I liked it. I remember there being fun times, and then I remember it getting really, really, really dark. I mean, like, to the point where it was like me and him in a house, no furniture, with candles burning, and we had tore the back seat of a minivan out, and it was on the living room floor, and I had a blow-up mattress in there. And, like, that's the way that we were living. And so in 2009 or 2008, and mine up until this point, I had never been introduced into Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know anything about the 12 steps. I had no clue that what I suffered from was a spiritual malady, a disease of perception. I didn't even know it was a disease. I had no knowledge of what was going on in my brain, is what I'm trying to say. I didn't know that I couldn't just wake up and say, I'm not going to drink or get high today. I'm just not going to do it. Like, I didn't know that I did not have a defense against that first drink, that peculiar mental twist that the book talks about, those strange mental blank spots. Like, even when I don't want to drink today, but I just can't not drink. And so my grandmother, long story short, my grandmother got diagnosed with brain cancer, right? And I did, up until the substances and alcohol took over, have a relationship with her, where I would go visit her. I would go down there and cut her grass. I would go sit there and spend time with her. Even into the substance abuse, I would still go and see my grandmother. And eventually it got to the point where it was like I was doing less and less and less. And her and my grandfather just got sick of it. And she had a sister that lived in Charlotte. And my grandmother's sister, her husband, him and my grandpa were Army buddies. That's how they had all introduced into each other. They met out there in Fayetteville and at Fort Bragg. And my grandpa was like, we're selling the house and we're going to move to Charlotte. And they sold the house and they bought a house in Charlotte. And they had been out there like a few months and she got diagnosed with brain cancer. And my dad's brother is a surgeon. And he flew out and he talked to her and talked to some doctors and stuff. And the long story short, they had misdiagnosed her and her brain was ate up with tumors. And my dad's brother told us, like, dude, she ain't going to live but 6 to 9 months, maybe. The chemo ain't even going to do much for her. And when I found that out, I was, like, crushed. But like I said previously, I had no knowledge of any of this stuff going on in my head. And the way I thought about it was like, this is my thinking, me. I'm thinking, well, hell, you just stop doing all this dumb stuff and you just man up and be a man and go do what you got to do and go on with your life. And I had in my mind, I really believed that that's what I was going to do. So I told my dad, I said, I'm done with all this, man. You can have all this shit. I'm done with it. I'm not going to be like this all messed up. And your mom's about to die, dude. Like, I love this woman more than anything. And I told my grandpa a half-assed truth of what was going on with me. You know, I just told him I wanted to straighten my life up. And he offered me to come and move in with him and help him take care of my grandma. And I went out there. And I also found out there that, recovery is not an outside job. It has nothing to do with the clothes I got on or the money I got in the bank or the car that I drive or any of that. All that's a bunch of bullshit. It's about what's inside of me, my heart, my spiritual condition. And so I went out there and I did all those things that I just talked about. I got a job. I got enrolled in college. I was working. I owned 2 vehicles. My grandpa had opened up some lines of credit in my name for me. From the outside looking in, it looked like I had everything together, like I was doing wonderful and well. And I'm watching this woman that I love and care about more than anything in the world die, get worse and worse and worse and worse by the day. And I remember I walked into her room one night. I'd go in there at night to bring her food, and I walked in there to sit down to eat a hamburger with her one night, and she didn't even recognize me. She was just so out of it and so doped up on the medicine that they had her on. And I was miserable on the inside. And I don't know if you're like me, I'm not going to be abstinent or dry, or I wouldn't necessarily call it sober at that time, but I'm not going to be like that and be miserable. If there's one thing I'm good at that I know how to do, I know how to change the way that I feel. And I made a decision. I said, I ain't going to be like this for another day. And I thought to myself, my life's might get pretty bad if I drink or get high. And this is a critical moment for me, is when I really knew that there was something. The book talks about grave emotional and mental disorders, and I knew that something had a hold of me that I could not just turn away, because I'm sitting there in my room at my grandparents' house thinking about going to do what we do, and the thought popped in my head of, maybe it would just be better if you just blew your brains out and just killed yourself. And I'm like, oh, where did that shit come from? But here's the truth. Like, I'm too much of a coward to kill myself. I just never been that dude. So I did what I know to do best. And I remember telling my dad, I'm not going to be like that when she dies. But here, what do? I go and I steal from them and abandon that whole situation. And now I'm back out in Raleigh on the streets, homeless, doing what I do. And my grandma dies from the cancer. And pretty much after that, no family really would let me be around much. I couldn't be trusted. I started stealing, and that progression of that vicious cycle of addiction just took hold and kept on. And I was all over the state of North Carolina in treatment centers and halfway houses and detoxes and in and out of jail, panhandling, living under bridges. And here's the thing that I would do. I'm like, well, heck, I've been to Charlotte before, right? I've been there. Now let's go to the mountains. And I go out there and go into a treatment center, and they put me in a recovery home or a halfway house, and they're telling me what to do. They're like, look, you got to live here. You got to get a job. You got to get a sponsor. You got to work these 12 steps. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, here's the truth. There's a line in the book, and more about alcoholism, and I say this every time I speak, and I share about it a lot, but it's really important, and I overlooked it for a long time. It says, we're assuming at this point that the reader desires to stop drinking. And here's what I found out, is through all that time, deep down inside of me, I really did not have a desire to stop drinking or stop doing the things that I was doing or living the way that I was living, because dope and liquor was my solution to everything, period. And it talks about in the back in the spiritual experience, contempt prior to investigation. The only thing that's going to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. It's a principle which is a bar against all information, and it's contempt prior to investigation, which is basically what I did at all these places. Like, I'm telling them, like, yeah, these people might have been bad. I get it. And they did this and it worked for them. I get it. But what I got going on is way worse than what they got going on. Trust me. That ain't going to work for me. Ain't none of that going to work. But the truth is, I ain't never even tried it. I'm going to write it off and tell you it just ain't going to work, and I ain't never even attempted it. And so I kept getting what I was getting. And to sum it up, like, that just continued on. Whether it was in Charlotte or Rockingham or wherever I was, it was the same story over and over. Like, here's the truth. Like, I got a story, Clark's got a story, Frank's got a story, Chuck, Paul, Mike. When you've been in Alcoholics Anonymous for long enough and down at places like Samaritan Colony, what I come to find out is, dude, me and Frank talk about this all the time. It's the same story over and over and over again. Yeah, my story might be unique and have its own little differences than yours, but it says it in the book. It's the same thing over and over. An alcoholic crushed by a self-imposed crisis, crying out for help, right? And I get to that point where it's like somebody's putting their hand out to me, and I'm that desperate man that's drowning. Am I going to grab it and accept some spiritual help, or am I just going to keep on until the bitter end, until I either blow my brains out or drink myself to death? And that's the path that I was headed down. And so in 2018, the woman that I'm married to today, she is from Rockingham. And she had left me in Durham, in the state that I was in. I can't believe she stayed with me for as long as she did and didn't leave sooner. She got a good family and all that. And she left and came back to Rockingham. And eventually they came and got me from Durham and brought me back to Rockingham. And I did the same thing in Rockingham that I've done in all these other places, all over North Carolina. Okay. I get a job. I get some money in my pocket. I build up a little bit of stuff in my life. Like the book talks about the man that builds up the structure, especially when there's some important engagement to be met or kept that will be favorably settled to him, right? And right before it, he pulls the structure down on his head because he goes on a drinking spree. And so I got all this that looks like good stuff going on, and I get off work one morning down there at Purdue at the chicken plant, and the thought pops in my mind, damn, it seemed like it'd be a good morning to go get a few beers from the store and go smoke some crack. Just like that. Out of nowhere. Like I said before, it seemed like a good idea to me. And it tells me, they wrote that book in 1935, and it tells me that all of this stuff is going to happen in that book, right? Without a God in my life, without a defense, without a relationship with a higher power. And there I am in that strange mental blank spot once again, right? And it says, like, I might be able to provide a defense but eventually that defense is going to give way, and the thought's going to win out. And that's what they're talking about, the insanity of the first drink. They're not talking about I'm insane because I go and get off work and want to smoke crack. They're talking about I'm insane because that thought pops in my head, and I think that would be a good idea for me to go do that. And the thought of the consequences and all that stuff that is going to happen, it doesn't even come into the consciousness of my mind. It's easily pushed to the side in the favor of the drink, and the thought wins out. And so off I go to the races. And next thing you know, it's me sitting in the house that we're renting. Lights cut off. I'm pissing in buckets. The water done got cut off. She's back at her mom's house living, still working. And there I am. There I go again. And now her family and some other people, her dad went to high school with one of the counselors at Samaritan Colony. And so they've been telling me about this place. But yet again, I still don't really have an honest desire to stop, okay? So what I do is I go down there for the first time to appease them, to get them off my back so they'll shut up, in the hopes of I can just brush this to the side, get out of here, and go and do what I want to do. And that was the first time I met the guy, the director of the colony. He's not, he wasn't the director back then, but he is now. And I went down there the first time. He sent me to some place out in Oakboro, some little, they didn't have this thing in the Pilgrim's Progress that they have now in Pinehurst. They didn't have that back then. And he sent me out there. I stayed there for like 3 weeks. And it was important because they're taking us to like 3 different AA meetings a day. And now, like, my brain's cleared up. So I'm really like listening a little bit, but I really don't want to stop drinking again. Here's the truth. I'm just full of shit at that point. I don't know no other way to say it, right? And I get down there to Samaritan Colony, and they're got me filling out these forms, and I'm reading this like clipboard I'm filling out, sitting in the lobby, and it says something about going to a recovery house or going to a halfway house, some kind of after treatment plan. And I'm like, oh no, this ain't, no way. But I showed up down there with a trash bag full of clothes from living in an abando pissing in buckets. But I'm not gonna go. I'm too good to go to a recovery home. I got some better idea or some better plan or some better place to go. And so I walk in there, I pick the clipboard up, I walk in there, and I'm like, hey, man, let me ask you something. Let me talk to you for a second. What does this mean about me? He's like, well, it means what it says right there. Are you willing to go to? I said, dude, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I can do this. I'm not ready to commit to doing all this. And I remember he got real serious with me. And he said, look, Bradley, he said, you seem like an all right dude. You seem like a good dude. But you have no idea the seriousness of the condition that you suffer from. You got no clue of what's going on in your head. And truthfully, what I know today is in that moment, that man knew more about me than I knew about myself. He dealt with hundreds of men like me, standing right there in front of him, just like that. He said, dude, if you ain't going to at least come in here and try to follow some directions and take the bed and do what I'm telling you to do, I'll pull my car around front right now. We'll go get your stuff, my trash bag full of clothes, and I'll take you and drop you off wherever you want to go, as long as it's in Rockingham. And I said, cool, let's go. He pulled his car around front, got me, and dropped me off. And I went to doing what we do. Shortly after, not even a few months after, this is at the end of 2018, I woke up in an abandoned house behind Purdue Chicken Plant in Rockingham with 5 or 6 Rockingham police standing around me, a bag of substances in my pocket, and in a bad spot in a bad place. Here's the truth. I stumbled up upon this place. I don't remember. I don't have a lot of recollection of it. I just know when I got to jail, I had a stack of paperwork like that, and they were talking about I was about to go to prison for 5 to 7 years. I had passed out in where they used to cook some stuff at, and I had no knowledge of it, but there was all this stuff around me. I mean, to them, it looked like something that it wasn't. Is what I'm trying to say. And so this is really when God started to reveal himself to me. I didn't have a spiritual experience like Bill Wilson did, like a big, bright light, burning bush moment. I had more of an educational variety spiritual experience, like it talks about in the back of the book, slowly over a period of time. But God started doing some things that I know I ain't capable of doing on my own, period. And the first thing was the lady that saw me passed out under this carport that called the police on me, okay? She, I guess, ended up getting in some trouble with the law afterwards, after the fact, for a non-related incident. And they gave her a court-appointed attorney that happened to be the same court-appointed attorney that I had, okay? And now I told this man what happened, to the best of my knowledge, and he didn't believe me. He thought that I was the one, and I was like, damn, I'm going to prison. It's over for me. So, because now she called the law on me and was in this case, or it became a conflict of interest. Simple as that, okay? So he had to drop my case and continue on with hers, and they gave me a court-appointed attorney an attorney in Richmond County that took my case pro bono, who happened to be one of the best defense attorneys in that county. And I told him what really happened, and he believed me. And he talked to the DA and told him what was going on, and I told him that I wanted to go to treatment, okay? And that's not how I got out of jail. I ended up, unbeknownst to me, I had a contempt for court. I went in there like an idiot and cussed the magistrate out under the influence. So I wasn't getting out no time soon. I had a 45-day contempt of court that I had to sit in there for regardless. So I'm in there in the jail, and I call this God granted me this moment of clarity, right? I hear all these guys talking about they can't wait to get out and do this and cook this. And I start looking around the the jail, and I'm like, and I'd say this a lot, and I don't mean any offense to anybody who got sober when they were older. This ain't a hit or a dig on anybody. But I was 28 years old. I'm sitting in here, and I'm looking around, and some of these guys are like 45, 50 years old. And I remember thinking to myself, man, that sounds like a terrible idea. I do not want to be sitting in here 47 years old about to go to prison for the 6th time. I just don't, no way. So I pulled this one guy to the side that I knew from the streets, and I told him about this thought that I had. And I don't come up with ideas like this on my own. And he said, man, if you really want to go back down there to Samaritan Colony, that would be your best bet. If not, you're going to be stuck in this cesspool. That's what he called it. I'll never forget those words. This cesspool of addiction for the rest of your life if you don't die out there in the streets. So I could have swore I would have told anybody when I got out of there I was never going to drink or never get high again. I got out, I drank, and I got high for 2 days. And I was walking down the road down there in Long Boulevard, whatever the name, Long Road, whatever the name of that road is down there in Rockingham, and Long Drive in a sketchy area, and something just came over me, man, and I stopped in the middle of the road and I looked up at the sky and I said, God, I don't know. My mom took us to church when we were kids. Like, I was raised in Catholic church. Like, I always kind of like, it talks about it in the book, like, I always believed in some, it's like, I just didn't know, and I didn't know, like, if God was real and that love was real, if all the things that I had done, if he could love somebody and care for somebody like me. But I believe truly today what the book says, that it's broad, roomy, never exclusive. It's open to all men and women who seek, period. That's what I believe, and because that's my experience. And so I cried out to God for help. I said, God, I don't know if you hear me, who you are, what you are, if you're there, if you're real. But if you hear me right now, I really need some help. And the idea just came in my mind, go in the probation office and tell them the truth for once in your life. Tell them what's going on. So I just got released. You got like 72 hours to go to report, or they're going to put a warrant out for your arrest. So I went in there and I told them the truth. I said, look, I want to stop drinking and getting high, but I don't know how. I don't know no other way to live. This is the only way I've known to live for the past 15, 20 years. I do not want to drink and get high anymore, but I don't know how to stop. And I can't stop on my own because I've tried, and I just can't do it. I was in a really rough place, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And they got me sent up to Chapel Hill because by this point I couldn't go to the detox in Moore County anymore. That wasn't an option. They just wouldn't let me. I'd been there like 15 or 16 times, something at that point. So they took me up to Chapel Hill. I stayed in there for 11 days. I finally got up the courage to call the man that is the director of the treatment center now, and I got him on the phone, and he chewed me out a little bit, kind of like I did Clark when I met him the first time. And he was willing to help me, though. And so he sent me to this place for 14 days after that. Then he had some guys come and pick me up, and they took me to the place in Pinehurst and to the safe house. And now we're in there, and I'm cleared up some mentally. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. And I still had that obsession. I could not stop thinking about using substances or drinking. Like just eating at my ass. An obsession, I got the definition written down in the front of my book, and I have all my sponsees write down all these definitions the first time we start reading. An obsession is a thought that pushes all other thoughts out of my mind. It's all I can think about. It ain't a fleeting thought that just comes and goes. It's like, I can't get rid of this. And guy pulled me to the side, the guy that ran the place back then, and my sponsor's brother. And he was like, dude, what's going on with you? And I told him straight up. And he was like, man, look, first of all, you don't ever have to drink or get high again if you don't want to. And I had already met this dude once before, a couple years ago, at the Detox in Moore County. He come up there to talk, and like I said, I was full of shit then, and I didn't want to stop. So now I'm like really tuned in and listening to him when he said that. He's like, you don't ever have to drink or get high again if you don't want to. And at this point, I really didn't. So he told me, he's like, here's what I want you to do. Tonight, when you go to bed, it don't matter if someone sees you or whatever, but I want you to go up there to that room before you get into bed to go to sleep. Get on your knees and ask God to take that obsession from you and really mean it and pray. Pray for it. And I didn't know nothing about the steps or any of that. Next thing I know, I'm up there in the room on my knees crying, doing this. I did a third step right there in the room and didn't even know what I was doing. But here's what I did know, I went to sleep that night and I slept for 6 hours uninterrupted. And when I woke up the next morning, I wasn't thinking about drinking or getting high. I was thinking about to go downstairs, write a gratitude list, read out of the AA book, and then come down here to the 7:30 to the morning meeting. And it was like I kept doing that day after day after day until it was time for me to go down there to the colony. And here's what I'll say about that. I didn't do everything that they asked me to do down there perfectly, but I did it just like my counselor Robert asked me, and I made a commitment to him to do it. I did it to the best of my ability. I did the best I could for the state that I was in, mentally, physically, and most of all, spiritually. And time runs up that I've been there, and it's time for me to go to the next thing. And I say this a lot too. I made the most important decision that I've ever made in my life down there at that treatment center, and that was this. Like, I don't understand none of this stuff about love, patience, tolerance, the 12 steps, any of this, right? But by this point, I had some belief in it that it worked, because the men that would come down there, like Frank came down there to speak when I was down there, that was a big deal to me. My sponsor, some other men. Paul came down there to speak. He was living in Dunn and came down there to speak when I was in there. And like, I listened to these guys when they talked, and I believed like they lived the way that I lived at one point. And now they seem to be living good lives, and they have something that I don't have. And whatever it was, I wanted it. And I knew like there's got to be a way to this. There's got to be something to Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I made a decision. Even if I don't understand it, I don't get it, some of it I don't want to do it, some of it I don't like it, all that's irrelevant. Here's what I know. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to commit. And they gave me the privilege to go stay in this recovery home in Aberdeen. And I went and I stayed there for 11 months. I got a sponsor. I started working the steps with him. We met every night, and Friday night in that back room, in the Al-Anon room. And he took me through that book and broke that book down to me page by page and word by word. And he instilled things in me that I try to instill in men today, like with all that stuff about just don't drink and go to meetings. I don't mean this. I say this a lot when I speak, and I don't mean offense. That some people can do that. Everybody ain't got to do what I got to do to stay sober. But me, personally, that's a bunch of bullshit. The people that I know that don't work the 12 steps and that don't try to pass the gift on to other people, I ain't seen many of them not drink. And that's just my experience, right? That's what was instilled in me, and that's what I try and do my best to instill in others. I stayed in that recovery home. Through the process of working those steps, I made amends with people, relationships, and things were restored in my life with my family. My sister, who I made an amends with, she ended up getting me a job for a guy that owns a very successful business in Pinehurst, and I worked for him, and I've worked for him for over 5 years, and we have a great relationship, and he takes care of me. And here's the thing about that that's so special to me and important to me is, like, I don't talk about this a whole lot, but it's like he gives back to the community here to the recovery community in Moore County. Like, he just paid like 5-something grand into a golf tournament that they're about to have at Pine Wild, or they might have already had it, for the colony, because he believes in Samaritan Colony because he's seen it work through me. He believes in Alcoholics Anonymous. He believes in the good of that, and that people can change because he's seen that result in me. And to me, that's a big deal. Like, me and my wife, we got married in recovery. We had a big wedding. Some people that are here tonight were there. I know Frank was there. We just bought a house about 10 months ago. We bought a house in Rayford. I got a couple dogs at home that I love and care about more than anything. They're like my little babies. I've had a lot of cool experiences in recovery, and I've been able to do a lot of things that I never thought that I would ever be able to do in life. And here's what I say, what I always like to kind of sum it up and end it with. Like, it's nice to have nice things. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I like nice stuff. I like to have nice clothes, a nice car. I like to spoil my dog, spoil my wife, all that. But here's the truth, man. Like, all that material stuff, that ain't got nothing to do with recovery. That's just a byproduct of Alcoholics Anonymous, and just a clear illustration and demonstration of what God can do and take a hopeless, junkie, alcoholic, strung out person on the streets like me and have the 12 steps work in their life and what they can become. And that I believe now has given me usefulness and purpose, right? Like, I don't always wake up in the morning and be like, what's God's will for me? I believe God's will is very simple for me. It's this. It's to help other alcoholics, period. It's to help other drunks, okay? And as long as I'm plugged into Alcoholics Anonymous and working the steps and continuing to try to work the steps in my life, I believe that I can do that, to try to help other people. Not that I can do it, but let God use me to help others, to be a vessel for God, to help the people that are about Him. That's what the book tells. The book tells me that's what my purpose is, to be a maximum service to God and His people. That it's that simple. The greatest gifts that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me is none of that material stuff. It's this, plain and simple, is that I woke up this morning in my own house. Well, I got woke up by a phone call this morning. Clark called me at like 9-something this morning. I like to sleep in some on Saturdays. So I got woke up. You still coming to speak tonight? At like 9 in the morning. Yeah, but I woke up in my own house with my dogs running around and happy. And I wasn't thinking about drinking or getting high. I didn't have to think, what do I got to go rob or steal? And my mama didn't go to bed last night worried sick to death if she was going to get a phone call that they found her son dead behind a crack house in Durham with a needle in his arm, right? Like, and I got a relationship and a defense against the first drink today. The thought of a drug or a drink. I'm an alcoholic. I'd be lying if I said I never think about drinking or getting high. That never comes in my mind. No, absolutely it does. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict. But the thought of a drug or a drink has not seemed like a good idea to me in quite some time, because my sanity has been restored through working the 12 steps. That's what they're talking about in the second step when they say, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. They're not talking about to make me stop wanting to get off work in the morning and smoking crack. I don't know. I could get off work on next Tuesday, and that thought popped in my head. But here's what I do know. Today, I have a defense against that thought. And that's a result of a relationship with a power greater than myself and Alcoholics Anonymous. Clark, I I really appreciate you asking me to do this. I hope everyone in here has a blessed Easter tomorrow, and that's all I got. Appreciate it.